All right, let's get into the tiers. Start off with Tier 1, headlines by Christian McCaffrey. No surprise there. Just 3 guys in this tier. McCaffrey, Breece Hall is your RB2, Matthew, and then Bijan Robinson is RB3. Let's start off with Christian McCaffrey. And first of all, we haven't seen a lot of Christian McCaffrey in the preseason, but Kyle Shanahan does not seem too concerned.
Yeah.
That's what's good when you're that obsessive about everything. I mean, when you're hurt, you can't go. But when you take every rep, every walkthrough, everything you do, you're just so deliberate in everything. When he's probably walking down the aisle to get married, he's probably thinking about his feet and how to do routes. No offense to Olivia, but he's obsessed with it. And so when you do get in these situations where you do get hurt and you can't go do all that stuff, at least he's put the work in before.
Tough break for Olivia, but good news for Niners fans that Christian McCaffrey is thinking about his routes as he's walking down the aisle. Do you think that Christian McCaffrey, Lawrence, is just the clear 101?
Clear cut as in, like, this is the only person you should draft in a fantasy league? I wouldn't say that. He's the consensus number 1. I've had number 1, and I've taken him number 1. But I've also had a second pick and taken Breece Hall. So if you're in a full PPR league, I wouldn't be mad at you if you took CeeDee Lamb, especially now that you got his contract. I would be mad if you took Tyreek Hill, because listen, both of these guys were within 1 point of Christian McCaffrey on a points per game basis last year for fantasy. So if it's those guys and maybe Breece Hall, then we have a conversation. But if you're going into half PPR, if you still play standard, yeah, I'm taking Christian McCaffrey number 1 in that situation.
Matthew, do you think there's a case to take Breece Hall over McCaffrey with the first pick?
I think there's a case. It's not one that I would make, but you could always make a case, which is just that, right? You know, McCaffrey has been injured throughout this preseason. He has prior to this, you know, like there were 2 years where he basically was unusable in fantasy. Now, he's been great the last 2 years. He's been great ever since he came to San Francisco. But there were 2 years where, again, similar situation. He was the number 1 player drafted in fantasy, or a very high draft pick in fantasy, and he missed much of the years. So Breece Hall, you know, younger in theory, not as much of an injury risk, although it's crazy to think about that because obviously, you know, 2 years ago he had the big injury as well. But so I think you could make a case for Breece Hall, but to me, the better case is that if you're not going McCaffrey at 101, then you're going CeeDee Lamb or Justin Jefferson or Tyreek Hill. Like, you're going just a different position. But it feels like if you're going Chris McCaffrey, I will say this though, for whatever it's worth, I'm in a guillotine league, and this is an 18-person guillotine league, not ours, a different one. 18-person guillotine league, and the team at number 1 picked Breece Hall over Chris McCaffrey. So I could sort of see that just because it's a guillotine league, and maybe you feel like, and again, it's going to be 36 picks before you, so you maybe feel like there's maybe a slightly higher floor or safety to Breece Hall because of this. We've seen McCaffrey miss the entire preseason, but I don't know. Every time I've had the 101, I've been taking Chris McCaffrey.
Yeah, I think the concerns about McCaffrey would be last year his stats were a little bit dependent on these long, explosive runs, which are not as projectable going forward. Also, he was healthy for the full season until basically the final week, which he missed. The Niners were awesome last year and were constantly in positive game script. Just in general, you know, project them to, on average, be the number 1 seed again. So there's a little bit with McCaffrey, and then there's the injuries. And,
well, by the way, not just the injuries, but this is, I think, an underreported story. Like, so much has been made about CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Ayuk, Jamar Chase's holdout. Trent Williams is holding out here, and they are a different team with Trent Williams on the offensive line. You know, and take it from somebody that, you know, went through, like, Trent Williams is one of those guys, like, take it from a Commanders fan. Like, Trent ain't bluffing. No. You know what I mean? Like, that's a guy who wants his money. Trent wants his money. And by the way, if you look at the numbers of Brock Purdy, I know this is a running back show, but if you look at Brock Purdy's numbers with and without Trent Williams, they are stark. There's a very big difference. So hopefully that gets figured out and Trent gets back into camp. But that is something that I would say, no, McCaffrey is such an asset in the passing game, and Shanahan is such a creative play caller that I think even if Trent Williams isn't there, they will scheme different ways to get him the ball. But I'm just saying, like, again, if you want to make the Breece Hall case, that's another thing that you could add to that case, is that, like, again, they're missing their, one of the best left tackles in football history.
Yep. Lawrence, let's jump to Breece Hall, who, last time we saw him, he was getting like 37 carries against the Patriots in Week 18. Seems like he is primed for workhorse usage behind an improved offensive line in New York, and also what should just be an exponentially improved offense with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, that's why it makes what he did last year all the more impressive, because he was doing it with that version of the Jets offensive line. And you spoke on Week 18 during the fantasy playoffs, from weeks 14 to the end of the season. He was the best running back in fantasy at 25 fantasy points per game in that span. So the whole season, he's RB2, right, in points per game. Again, with that version of the Jets O-line, how high would I take him? I just said it earlier. I've taken him with the second spot, because I know if I don't have a chance to get him back. If you're at the number 2, 3, 4 spot and you want that top tier level running back, you have to get him at that point, or you run the risk of letting someone else get him at 9 or 10. That team's going to be good. If your team getting Breece Hall at the 9th or 10th pick in your fantasy draft, that's going to be a pretty solid team. So I would take him as high as 2, and that's exactly what I've done.
Yeah, I don't think there's much more I can add to how good Breece Hall is. Better offensive line, better offense, longer sustained drives, and oh, by the way, Rodgers, wanting to protect Rodgers, they're going to want to be more balanced on offense as well. I think the better question is what about Breece Hall versus Bijan Robinson? I've seen that debate, right? And it's razor thin. They're both awesome. They're both going to have monster years. I guess, to me, the argument for Breece Hall over Bijan Robinson, this is why I did this. Like, at this level, you have to sort of, you have to nitpick a little bit. And I guess I feel better about the backfield that Breece Hall's in, where I'm not worried about, Braylon Allen's going to get a little bit of work, but whatever, versus Tyler Algier, who we continue to see, like, Tyler Algier's good.
Yeah,
he's not Bijan Robinson, but Tyler Algier is good, and the reports out of camp is that they do want to use Tyler Algier some. Bijan Robinson's still going to get a ton of work. He's still obviously going to be active in the passing game, but when you think about the Falcons, they've got Bijan Robinson and Tyler. I guess I feel better about the talent of Tyler Algier and the competition. Better meaning worse. Like, I think Tyler Algier is a higher level of competition for Bijan than Braylon Allen is for Breece Hall or Jordan Mason is for Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because there's so much going on here. First, Tyler Algier was awesome. His rookie season wasn't as good last year, though.
Right.
He was sub 4.0 yards per carry. Last year, Bijan Robinson, who quietly had like almost 1,500 scrimmage yards, 8 touchdowns, he was fine overall. He just didn't live up to expectations. But last year, Bijan, when you factor in Cordarrelle Patterson's carries as well, he got less than 50% of the Falcons' running back carries, which is just, I think, insane. And I think
we should fire Arthur Smith again. Can we just go back in time and fire him again?
Oh, he might get a new chance to get fired based on how the Steelers have looked in preseason. But I think the thing with Bijan is that there are just so many kind of institutional pressures that are going to push him towards more workhorse status where, like, the Raheem Morris is coming. You think he's not going to use Bijan Robinson? You really think he's not going to use Bijan Robinson?
He already said it. He's like, our plan is to get our best player of the ball. Yeah. In fact, speaking of Arthur Smith.
Which is smart. I call the Josie offense.
That is smart, Matthew. And speaking of Arthur Smith, Bijan's first 9 games last season, 16 touches a game. His last 8 went up to 19.5 touches per game. Unfortunately for Arthur Smith, he waited too late to do that. So, now Raheem Morris comes in. He's like, you know what? I'm not going to play around like that. I'm going to get this young man the ball who's doing behind-the-back catches and stuff like that. I'm going to get him the ball. So, yes, Tyler Algier will have a role and should, quite frankly, have a role as the change-of-pace running back. But if you're going to get Bijan Robinson 19 touches per game, that is enough for him to pay off he's getting drafted.
We love Bijan this year. Again, he's going to have a monster year. The question is just Breece versus Bijan. Where do you have him ranked?
I have Bijan as RB3.
Okay, same thing. We're both
Breece
saying
Breece is definitely the number. I feel like he closer to CMC to me than Bijan would be to Breece because of the point you made about the competition that they'll have in their respective backfields.
All 3 guys are tier 1 running backs. All 3 guys are first rounders this year. It's just, to me, that's the debate. I think most people agree Christian McCaffrey won. Then it's Breece versus Bijan for RB2, and we're both Breece slightly over Bijan because, again, slightly less competition for Breece in the backfield there. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotorWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.